Hello, and welcome to Lawless Conversations with Katie. I'm Katie, your host. This podcast goes through various difficult subjects such as abortion, gun control, prison systems, or gender, to name a few, and dives into all different aspects of the arguments that might be offered or discussed. At the moment, we are wading our way through the subject of abortion, and today we are talking about personal responsibility. Although I have spent a lot of time and effort into researching these topics, I am by no means an expert on this subject or any other subject I will explore in the future. So take my thoughts with a grain of salt, and of course, if you have any questions or things to add, please share them. I try my best to keep my own biases out of these explorations, and because I'm talking about many aspects of a subject, including opposing ideas and arguments, know that these are not necessarily ideas that I subscribe to or hold personally. I will, however, explore different arguments as if I do believe in them in order to truly explore all facets of this subject. Finally, because these are difficult subjects, there will be some content that is hard to hear and might be triggering. Please understand I am not looking to insult anyone, but to explore these subjects openly and honestly. I don't want to convince anyone to think like me. I want to convince people to think, period. So without further ado, come have a lawless conversation with me. Abortion, when placed in the hands of each woman facing that choice, implies a level of personal responsibility. And I've brought this concept up before in the adoption episode, but I want to expound on it a little more. Not only is she forced to face the consequences of her actions, she is also forced to live with the consequences of any decision or action that led to becoming pregnant. The full spectrum of decisions are at her disposal, and so too is the full spectrum of consequences, depending on what further decisions she makes. Thus, she is required to deal with the weight of keeping a child, giving it up for adoption, or aborting it. In this model, personal responsibility is and must be placed on the woman. Sadly, this is placed only on the woman because, like it or not, men do not have to stay. Men do not have to be involved if they do not want to, and many are not. Personal responsibility cannot be held or taken if the full spectrum of choices are not available to her. Here's what I mean by this. When the government comes in and begins to make decisions about if abortion can be done, personal responsibility is no longer available for women to take on because the government has taken it on by way of outlawing it. Then you might say, well, the government didn't make the decision to have sex and get pregnant. And you would be right. However, no matter the decisions that were made before the abortion decision is up for question, the moment keeping or aborting a fetus becomes a decision made by the government, that aspect of the cycle of choices is no longer something a woman can be held responsible for because it was no longer her choice to make. If a woman becomes pregnant over and over again and gives up her children to adoption or loses them to the foster care system, one cannot look at her and say she needs to take personal responsibility for her actions and get her life together so she can take care of her children. Because in all actuality, she did not have the choice to not bring those people into this world. The government did, and the government chose to force her to give birth to each one. Now, this is an extreme example, and one would hope that if she got pregnant once, she would then learn that contraceptives are important and seek some form of protection, if she is going to keep having sex. And the alternative to having all those children is getting multiple abortions, which is never a good alternative. But that is not what I'm looking at here. What I'm looking at is the transference of personal responsibility for having or aborting a child from the woman to the government. If the woman is choosing to have an abortion, her consequences are very real. They do not come in a legal form, they come in a much deeper and darker form. She will have complications with her body and reproductive system. She will deal with the what-if scenarios that will haunt her when she least expects it. She will live with the shame and guilt of what has been done. And unless she is a psychopath, these consequences will lead to change or cause irreparable damage physically or mentally. All of this will be the consequences of her choices, and she will be held responsible for those decisions because she made them. But as soon as the government takes over that decision process, by all logical thought, she cannot hold that responsibility. Where is the obligation to take care of the child or children that women have when they become pregnant. I discussed in a previous episode the concept of having those who voted to ban abortion taking on foster care children or being required to adopt children. This is one of the sides of that coin that can be extrapolated from the government making such choices as the availability of abortion. If the government can make this a very personal decision and thus take on the personal responsibility of that choice, they can then turn around and create laws affecting others that had nothing to do with that decision, beyond voting for the ban. Another option is to take foster care and adoption away as a choice altogether. If she is to be given the consequences of the government's choice, then there can be no alternative, because once a loophole is established, the whole thing breaks down and no longer makes sense. If you are interested in commenting about this episode, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS@yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at Lawless Convos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next week as we talk about aftercare after the child is born. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward to next week.